with
All right, Alex, over to you, my man. I'm not going to give you any introduction.
all right, hey, I'm Alex, and if it's really sweet. It's about 98 slides, but I go really fast.
Nice.
And yeah, all right, fingers crossed. You see a slide with a beautiful view that I'm blocking
Yes,
in the
sir.
kneeling position. All right, hey, I'm
Looks
Alex Racey, and we're here to talk about sleep. Um, Now let me see if I can function my slide. That didn't do it. That didn't do it.
they didn't teach you that in how to in the Delta Force.
No, they didn't teach me that in the Delta Force. Thank God. Um, anyway, so hey, uh, I'm a performance coach. I I started working out purposefully in the 10th grade, and that was associated actually with being late to the testosterone party. I was 4'10" in the ninth grade, and I couldn't get in advanced PE. But in the 10th grade, they let me in advanced PE, and I started playing around in a weight room in 1980, whatever, five, and I never stopped since then. So I've been very active. Um, I've been into performance my whole life, really. Getting my butt kicked on bicycles in junior high, playing some junior high basketball, and then on into the military. And you can kind of see a little bit of my history there from a military standpoint. And what I would say, all of that isn't saying with 25 years of active duty and being in Delta for over 17 and a half years and all of that is I have made every mistake there is to make in performance. And with that, I've cleaned most of them up. And then you get going really good. Stu and I were just talking about this. You get really good with your behaviors, and then life throws some stuff at you, and the next thing you know, all the stuff you're getting paid to help people fix, you're not even doing yourself. And it's like, hey, I've been on my computer sending emails, work related stuff since at 10 p.m. the 3 nights this week. What's going on? So that's a little bit about my military background and that sweet picture uniform, which probably won't ever happen again. And then when I retired in 2016, I joined corporate America. And this picture doesn't have much to do with that. I didn't not fit in as much as Elf here in this picture, but I really like this picture, so I try to get it involved in any presentation I do. So corporate America, what I learned there was, hey, they don't give you 2 hours from basically, like 10 to actually 2.5 hours, 10:30 to 1 to work out and eat every day when you're when you're at work, and it's much harder to take care of yourself. So that's when I started. 2016, early 17, I started doodling in a notebook about what a performance program, like what I had helped build and what I experienced in the military, what that might look like for civilians who are like, they're attached to the desk building etch a sketches and not able to break away for 2.5 hours every day. And then that's where I came up with my Better Basics and started coaching in 2018. I officially started a side business with my company's approval, and kind of here's where I live. As you look across those four buckets, I get people thinking and operating on good basics first. One thing I experienced throughout my whole time in the military, and looking at all these legends of the commando world, is they were really good at the basics, and because they were really good at the basics, they had advanced capabilities and all the things we were doing, which was more probably along the lines of shoot, move, communicate versus eat, sleep, move, think. But that's how I approach my four buckets of personal performance. For me, being high performance is not just physical. I want my clients and the people I work with to be super high functioning physically, mentally, emotionally, and I want them to not just like be knocking it out of the park at work. I want them to get home and still have all the energy in those three domains, all the capacity to be able to get it, done as a spouse, as a hobbyist, as a friend, as a dad, as a mom, as a citizen, whatever they've got going on. So that's my definition of high performance. And these are kind of all my start points with like just the things that you should be doing pretty good at the basic level. So all the low hanging fruit stuff. Today, well, before we like dive into sleep, and again, I'm already whatever on slide 4 of 98. I'm just kidding with that. I think there's a total of 10 slides, and there's only one really that matters, and we're about there. So I'll pause here and just say, as we're diving into the sleep stuff, this is a perfect group size for us to just really go hardcore on Q&A the whole time. So turn your mics on. And if I'm talking about something and it's like you're like, hey, I got something I need to get out right now about what Alex just said. That works for me just fine. Now I don't want to step on our hosts' toes. So Stu and David, the guy who hates Parker, have a problem with what I just said and how we roll through here. Let me know now.
I'll just keep David on mute. If he tries to come off of mute, I'll just mute him immediately so he can't
All
talk.
right.
Does that work?
Cool. Cool.
Yeah,
So for the group,
if you could turn your camera off, Stu, that'd be awesome. If you could just turn your camera off, that'd be great for us too.
Anything on what I've talked about so far, as far as the basics, my definition of high performance, any of that stuff?
Hey, Alex, one thing that I thought was interesting, as we started, you started helping me with stuff is, hey, I don't know how it was in Delta Force, but in the Navy, like each community was a little bit different on how they looked at sleep. Uh, in the aviation community, like sleep like was required. Like you had to have 8 hours of sleep. But in like the surface warfare community, like driving ships, it was almost like the opposite. It was like you're cool if you don't get any sleep, and we're gonna run you to the ground and see how good you can do on 2 hours of sleep. And we're gonna let you drive a ship in the middle of the night while not having any sleep. It was like a an honored badge thing to like not go on sleep. So it was really interesting to me, like the different, just in the same branch of service, the different communities.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I think that's something that more thematically before we dive into the basics. We had the same thing in the military. We like the pilots had drugs. Like, hey, if you can't get your 8 hour sleep opportunity and a mission has to go, here's some pills for you to take. But we didn't we didn't have to take them at any certain time. I will say that I went back and forth overseas in for much shorter times than most people. So like my deployments were much shorter, probably averaged 4 months. But I was probably 13 times. And most of those times we were on reverse schedule. And within a few years, I was more in a leadership position of the war than not. So I had responsibilities outside of our assaulting window. Probably got on average 4 to 5 hours of sleep on those deployments. And I prided myself on like, yeah, that's enough. I got 19 hours a day to do stuff. Now that being said, we would have commanders who, when they were getting sleep, I would say were some of the smartest, most capable leaders in the universe. But some of those dudes would not leave the tactical operations center, and they would catnap at their desk in the back, and they turned into absolute bozos. I mean, they made really horrible decisions. A lot of times based on how we did operations and how the NCO Corps had a huge, we had an outsized capability to push back on operations compared to most organizations. We could fix a lot of those poor decision problems before we sent an assault force out the door. But it wasn't until I had finished, it was 2015 when I started as the performance director, the preservation of the force and family director at the unit. and like sleep technology was just starting to be a thing. And we were paying like $1,000 a piece for these ready bands that, like all technology, they were probably about 20% as effective as what an Aura ring that anybody can buy on Amazon could get with regard to what it tracked and how efficient it was. So yeah, we saw that all the time. Like people, want to be able to write in their memoirs how they never slept during the surge of Iraq in 2006. So, and I'm and I was guilty of it, and I've been working on my sleep improvement with an Aura ring. So I have 5 years of data at this point, and it is tough. It is tough to live the wrong life around sleep and then try to get it back into where you're doing the best you can for yourself and for your family and everybody else who comes on you as well. So here's something, as you're looking through that, this is obviously a focused data point on work. Some of you might be like looking at that number of, it only costs average employer $2,500 a year for sleep per employee. Well, that's like, think about that number as it pertains to average income versus maybe what you're making or what your upper echelon folks are making to equal this average. And then, I don't know how many people on here are business owners. If you're on this call at this time of the day on a Wednesday, most likely you are at least at the top of your business organization, if not the founder owner. Like, what is it costing you efficiency wise, effectiveness wise, focus wise to be like that bottom number there? Let's just take kind of the middle, 5%, 5% off a day after day. Like, what is that costing you with getting your business organized? And then on top of that, like, what's it costing you when you get home and that like tractor beam from your couch attaches to your butt and pulls you in because you just, you don't even have the mental capacity to like realize it's happening. Next thing you know, even though you're kind of not on it when you got home, all of a sudden you're wide awake and it's time to go to bed. Holy cow, what just happened? So that's where I'm like, hey, you got to start somewhere with sleep and how you try to produce a repeatable quality sleep outcome. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time. So here we go. I like to think about stuff kind of, I don't know if everybody on here was in the military. But I think of things like strategically and then tactically. Strategically, it's good to think about the mountaintop, and then tactically, how are we going to get to the mountaintop? Does that make sense?
Hey, Alex, come closer to the mic a little bit. It's hard, a little bit harder to hear. We were joking about you being close, but
okay,
a little bit better.
How's that? Yeah. Is that better?
Way better. Thanks.
Okay, cool. I know. I'll stare at the microphone so you all get weirded out that I'm not looking at you. And,
thanks.
So I'll talk towards the microphone. So hey, for strategy, super simple. This should make very much 100% sense to all of you. The strategy, when I think about sleep, I want to have a relaxed body. I want to have a calm mind. And I want to focus on the consistency of all of the tactics we're going to talk about. So tactically, it's three things, like kind of three big buckets, I should say. You've got your environment, you've got your rituals, pre-bed rituals, and then you've got your clocks. And we're just going to go down the list. Anything on the strategy, would anybody be like, no, relaxed mind, relaxed body, calm mind doesn't work for me. I need to go to bed angry after a CrossFit workout?
Listen to some like death metal music, like
Stephen
likes. Yeah.
Little Pantera going into that final 15 minutes before you turn the lights down.
I think it sounds easy, but maybe it might be easier said than done. for
Right
some.
on.
And
Yeah.
I think practically speaking, I don't know about you guys, but I've got young kids, and one in particular is a giant turd bucket every night, right? And so I think you have to be very conscious of like the reality of your situation when you're assessing, okay, yeah, I'm of course I'm calm. Are you really? Because like I know every single night my dude fights it and I'm pissed off. And then like and I'm not consciously addressing that before I go to bed. You know what I mean? So I think there's very practical that this is the reality of a calm mind for some of us is actually a challenge.
Yeah. The 2 hours prior to our parent bedtime is probably fighting children.
Can be the most stressful time of the day.
Yeah.
You guys need to like, go with this. But no, don't do jujitsu on your baby. But that is like what you're all bringing up. I'm a little past that point of kid life. My youngest is 11. He fights it from a like a teenager or 20-year old. Oh, why do I have to go to bed? It's not even 10 o'clock. Kind of standpoint. But we don't we're not dealing with the unreasonableness of younger kids still. Like our biggest hiccup recently was thinking we should get another puppy, and that's already sorting itself out too. But like what you all are talking about, man, if you can build a plan around that. Hey, I just did my 2 hour slugfest getting the kids in bed. Like recognize that you don't have a calm mind at that point and figure out like, hey, is there a body scan or could I do, there's some resources out there. Like there's this thing Huberman put on, Andrew Huberman's a podcaster. He put this thing out. It's called non-sleep deep rest protocol, which is a more scientific name of some hippy dippy stuff that really works from a calming your brain down and almost like giving yourself like you can do an SDR. It's a 10-hour, it's a 10, excuse me, it's a 10-minute protocol he goes through that he taped on YouTube, but there's no video to it. You can do that at lunchtime and your afternoon is going to go much better because of the state you allowed your brain to go to for a few minutes. But I've I've played around with it and it is a good way to downregulate your mind after like what you all are talking about as parents with fighting kids to bed. So it may be something like, hey, we're let's transition. We finally got the kids in bed and they're not up and we're not now let's figure out how to as quickly as possible transition our brains from fight or flight back into uh, rest and relax mode as we perfect our ability to get to sleep and get the most efficient sleep as we can.
Alex, for those of us taking notes, what was that resource? You said it was Huberman. What was the resource?
It's if you NSDR, non-sleep deep rest. And I'd be happy to throw a little one pager together for everybody if you want when we're wrapped up here, because I know a lot of times I hear feedback that, oh man, I was tracking with what you were saying the whole time, and then an hour later I was like, wait, what was that thing that whatever. So totally cool to put something together for you guys. Anything else on the strategy? Because I mean, what you're all talking about is exactly what what people pay me to help them fix and help them build their individual processes.
Alex, one thing on my side, I also have older kids, kind of like you, youngest 13, and so our evening is going later and later. So my son got home from work at 9 o'clock. Dinner was late with him, and then running the budget with the wife after that, and then looking at a trip we're planning for this summer, and then starting to do some studying for myself, and not necessarily anything other than just wanting to be maximally productive until I just absolutely fall asleep in the chair that I'm working on the computer. And it seems like a terrible plan, but it also seems really effective. Like, all right, feel good. I'm getting stuff done. And yet, I'm here because I want to learn how to do it better because, I'm probably getting 6 hours on an average, and that's not a good thing, right? So anyway.
Yeah, and everything you just talked about, we're going to dive into. I'm gonna, I'll tell you, like I'll spoiler alert you. Like, yeah, I'm gonna tell you a lot of the things you just talked about. You could be doing better if you wanted to focus on your sleep quality and possibly sleep duration. But what you just described is also very common with everybody I talk to. I was talking to I'm supporting a company now part time. So I was having an onboarding call with a guy yesterday, and he's literally like, "Well, I finish by the time we get home from jujitsu, it's 10 o'clock p.m. So I start cooking dinner." I'm like, "What? What? You start cooking dinner at 10 o'clock?" And then he's like, "And then I get back on my computer after I get my daughter uh, tucked in, and I'll finish up a couple work things till 1 or 2 a.m." So and that's just like, he's like, "I feel very like I'm getting a lot of stuff done." So I'm going to try to convince you of playing around with adjusting that for sure. So let's dive into the tactics. A lot of you all talked about having kids. So for me, like that environment for my kids and that ritual, you all that are parents maybe would agree with this, that you do everything you can to make sure that sleep comes quick and stays deep and is easy for your kids to stay asleep all night, right? And you don't mess with their environment, mess with their rituals. So I like to think of all the basics for environment. I'll just run down through them. You've got, and this is the standard from the science for most people. There is always an outlier. So everything I'm going to say is, here's the way. There's always somebody who's like, well, that's not the way for me. That's fine. And we can talk about those eaches and ors as well if we want to. Environment, super dark, super cool. Like, I love getting in bed when it's cold. Quiet and or a constant noise source that works for you and allows you to stay asleep. Um, your bed should be comfortable for you. Some people that's softer than other people it's super hard. And then in addition to that comfort, we talked about kids, but also critters. Like, is your bed, like, do you have the minimum stuff in your bed that you need? If you have a spouse, you probably need to have them in your bed. But if you can avoid kids and animals at all costs, that would be a good thing. So people are like, "Oh yeah, it's supposed to be dark and it's supposed to be cold." And then I say, "Well, why do you think that is? And how do you define dark?" So for me, and this is especially useful if you're a traveler and you end up in hotels once in a while. Like, when I go to a hotel, if I'm on my game, I go in there, and well before I'm ready to go to sleep, I turn all of the lights off in that room. And I close the curtains, and I'll use the pants hanger to keep the curtains closed. So I block out all the outdoor light or outside light. And then I look around that room for all of the super bright LEDs that are everywhere. And I take 5 minutes and I carry electric tape with me. And I use the 50 pillows that all hotels have on every bed. And I just go around and I block all of those light sources, like literally every one that I can. I don't mess with the fire detector because I've heard bad stories about that. But if I can do it, I'll figure out a way to try to block the angle from where I'm going to be sleeping to the fire detector, if that's a big deal. And why don't I tell you that story? Because for me, what a dark room means is I'm never awake in the middle of the night enough to be staring at a light wondering what it is. So that's my definition of a dark room. A recent example of messing that up, we got a new air purifier. in our bedroom. And it makes this great little hum that is great for sleeping. And I didn't even think about it when I went to bed. But later that night, it's on my side of the room. I found myself staring at this blue light over in the corner of our bedroom. And it was enough to where I realized it's the middle of the night and I'm staring at a blue light on a new air purifier that I didn't think about before I went to bed. So that's my example of like, hey, what's a dark room equal? And if you just take that with you on travel and stuff, and then when you assess your own room's darkness, and at home you can figure out ways to kind of block even your smoke detector lights with some little black stickies or whatever. That could be a huge a win for you. Not like the next day you're going to feel amazing, but over time, any little bit of sleep improvement we can do is going to show up as like, hey man, just life is better. And I didn't even realize why, but it's because I'm getting a little bit better sleep the last few months. So anything on that light thing, because usually somebody's like got their own story.
I'll give a plug for Steven's manifesto. He did one a while ago, and one of them that I think a lot of us do is just we have our cell phones in our rooms right next to us on our night table. And Steven did a really good post on one of our manifesto issues about it. And like a solution is just get an old alarm clock that you can like dim down to almost nothing, and put that in there and put your cell phone actually in another room.
Yeah, and on the clock thing, I just tell people to turn them around. Um,
Yeah.
if it's got any light at all, because that's another. I mean, this is kind of mouse turd level stuff, but like you don't want to like. I would recommend not trying to see what time it is if you wake up in the middle of it, because that's just going to create anxiety. But a lot of these things are just like so habitual. You really you have to make an effort to get rid of them. And then so let's dive into the cold thing real quick. People are like, yeah, cold bedroom, but what does that mean? So here's kind of how I describe all a cold room does for you. Your body cools down about 1 to 3 degrees internally for you to get good sleep. So obviously a cold bedroom is going to help that be the case, right? So we start with a cold room, we get under the covers, and all, like in my mind, all the cold room allows us to do is if you wake up hot under the covers, whether it's like an arm or your upper body or a leg or your whole body, like when you throw the covers off, you shouldn't still be hot. And that's literally the third grade version of what a cold room is like. Oh, I'm hot. I'm awake and I'm hot. And I threw my covers off and I don't remember the rest of the night. So that's a perfect outcome. And that's why we're that cool. Obviously, the other things about comfort. I'll tell you one story about comfort. My wife was never in the military, but she makes a military bed literally every day. I mean, she's like a neat freak. And if I forget to loosen up the sheets at the bottom of the bed and I go to sleep with my feet pinned in any one direction, I can guarantee you sometime in the night it is not going to be, especially if it's a cramp that wakes me up, because then there's some audible components to that, because they really really hurts when I get it. But I have to remember, hey, great, she makes a beautiful bed. I gotta wreck it every night at the bottom so that I can get a better night's sleep. So those are the kind of things like with like, hey, it says I'm supposed to have a hard bed, but I don't sleep well on a hard bed. Well, okay, you want to find what's right for you. That includes like what your pillow feels like and what it does to your neck, and like with the pillowcase, like all of that stuff. That's like all super easy stuff. If we're spending a third of our life, in this environment, in this bed, I think it's super important to max that thing out for sleep quality. So that's kind of all, again, super simple, super basic, on the environment. Any questions or thoughts? All right, good shot. Good stuff. Good stuff. Everybody's got 100% go on all that.
Good
What you
stuff.
guys?
No, I was just gonna say, good job.
Right on. Okay, so rituals. This is really where like having kids should make sense to you. I was talking to a guy the other day. Um, he's like, yeah, for some reason, just sleep hasn't been as great the last few days. And he's got an aura, and we went through the same Better Basics program that Stu and I went through. And I'm like, well, tell me, like, um, talk me through, because he's got young kids. I was like, talk me through kids going to bed through you going to bed the last few nights. Let's see if we can figure something out. And he's the CFO of a company, and he's like, well, 3 times over the last week, once we got the kids to bed, I had to go down and do some work on the computer for 30 minutes to 60 minutes. And that totally wrecked his pre-bed rituals, because as a dad, he and his family, like, they all kind of did bedtime together, if that makes sense. And so the kids' rituals, which they, none of us, unless we absolutely have to, ever mess up any of the kids' rituals to get them in bed, especially when they're babies and toddlers, was really the beginning of their pre-bed rituals. Like a normal night looked like, they had their little, all 4 of them together time, and then mom takes one kid, dad takes one kid, they get them settled in bed, and then mom and dad would come back to the kitchen and do some like cleanup and meal prep for the next day, like all calm, low intensity, down regulation style stuff, until they ended up going to bed as well. And he just never really realized that that was all part of his pre-bed ritual, until we kind of identified that, yeah, man, you messed that up with 30 minutes of sending emails that could have waited till the morning. Um, and it's going to cost you. And what was interesting for him is he had already done a lot of really good quality work on getting better sleep. So he was already in it, loving it. So that little mess up where all of a sudden he's like, man, I just, like, last night was not as good. I was getting 9 out of 10, like, subjectively feeling my personal opinion on how sleep was going. And now I'm like back down in the 5s and 6s. And it happens pretty quick. And that's the beauty of getting good sleep. You can identify that you're not getting good sleep. And then it's more important to you to figure out what isn't working, what's different. So on the rituals, just like our kids, I talk a lot about the bees. A lot of people use a real book as part of their pre-bed ritual. A lot of people use a bath or a shower. Like, they heat their body up a little bit, so that when they get off, it immediately starts cooling off, and that helps them get better sleep. Some people like a warm cup of like sleepy time tea or whatever. So you got beverages, you got books, beverages, baths, you've got body work. If you're getting into bed and you have lots of really adhesed muscles, or like just like stiff sore points, like, it might be useful to have a nice soft roller in your bedroom that you do just a few minutes of roller work before you get that tension out of the body with some body work. And then there's the brain work, right? When David comes off the top rope for the last time, the kids finally stay asleep. Like, he should be thinking about, how do I now down regulate my brain and get off the edge, so that I'm allowing myself the best opportunity to get good sleep, as good a sleep as I can. And so one of the things I've found useful is like a long form body scan sleep specific app. So you got to find a voice that you like on whatever app you use, or whatever free resource you find out there. That'll, like, I think the body scan works well, because it kind of talks you through every part of your body, and it talks you through making sure you're not holding any tension. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about the brain. That process really helps your brain kind of get off of, I hope I didn't bruise my kid's face up when I came off the top of that last time, dropped the elbow, or whatever you're stewing on. You see what I did there, Stu?
I do see what you did there. It's funny.
Yeah, sweet. So,
Hey, Alex, what are like, so I know of a few of the apps for like essentially like mindfulness meditation stuff. So I've used the app called Calm, Calm. I'm a Peloton user. So Peloton actually has an app that does a bunch of mindfulness meditation stuff.
okay.
I'm sure like you could probably just find some stuff on
Yeah,
YouTube.
there's like I think the OG in that space was called oh gosh, Headspace.
Headspace, that's right.
If you've got a performance app, I don't know about Garmin, but almost every, like the Aura app even has
Yeah, that's right.
stuff you can play off of it. So I know we just talked about not having the phone in the room, but I mean, we're all adults. You can if you need it to play something to help you sleep. I mean, we can be adult and not be, oh, it was in the room, so I had to death scroll on Instagram for 3 hours when I plan to be asleep or whatever. I mean, you gotta, like, that's a whole nother level of problem. We should talk about with like self control. Not that I'm great at self control, but at least with the phone, I usually am. So I use one called 10%, as in the book 10% Happier. I've just found that to be like, I kind of like that guy's uh, principles that he talked about in the book, and then somehow ended up finding the app, and there's a few go-to sleep um, sleep specific meditations that just help me get to sleep when I need it. There's even one that's like go to bed angry, that occasionally I find myself using and may be useful to you as well, David. What you got, Stephen?
Do you use that every night as part of protocol?
Yeah, no, definitely not. But if you're just like exploring that as a useful thing to help you get better at this, like when I started using them, I did use it every day. And so my wife and I have I'm an early riser and she's a late riser, which makes me an early better and her a late better. So we have 3 teenagers. It works out great because she handles that. Hey, Will's still out flying around at night for his instrument rating. And I don't have to stay up worrying about that because mama's going to come wake me up if anything crazy is going on. And then in the morning, if anything needs to be done, puppy wise or otherwise, that's my jam, and I handle that space. So we tag team the day. So it was okay for me to have this app playing a 30-minute body scan because she wasn't in there to be like, can you please turn that off? This is annoying as all get out. So if you all do like head to bed simultaneously, you might like have that discussion about, hey, let's use this as a way to improve our sleep and get an agreement on that one before you just like, hey, this is a new thing we're doing. Press play. Make sense? Yeah, I think for me, like, so in the last week, I've used it twice. So definitely not an every night thing.
What were the triggers for those 2 times?
Just busy brain.
Okay.
Yeah, busy brain.
Like you knew headed to bed, like tonight I'm full up here.
Yeah, yeah. And along with like, I'm not even like the last 2 days I've found myself not practicing what I preach. I've been on my computer just because it's just, it's a busy time, and I, just like combat, like, oh hey, sorry, bad guys, can't come execute a raid against you right now because, well, I got to get my sleep. I mean, we there's always the goal of getting good sleep as often as and as consistently as we can, is that's also going to make us much more prepared for those occasions where it's like, hey, it's whatever, I'm going home to see my high school buddies and we're going to a Pearl Jam concert and I'm going to be up till 2 a.m. It's all good. it's the consistency of behaviors that allows us to work outside of that space more efficiently and without as much damage when we do it. So that's like the calm brain thing. The other thing I would say is, so that was brain work. The only other one is breath work. And if you find yourself up in the middle of the night and your brain starts racing, I use usually just a four by four box breathing technique that I count. So I can't count to four times and then count the rep and then start counting to four again. I can't do that and think about whatever I was thinking about I need to do in the morning when I'm actually getting out of bed. So I find that box breathing helps me physiologically down regulate, and the counting in my brain mentally and emotionally allows me, or maybe it's just because I'm not that smart, it doesn't allow me to think about the things that I need to do when I get up. So that combination of the physiological, hey, I'm telling my body through breathing to chill out, and I can't think about whatever it is I found myself thinking about to the point I'm awake now because I'm counting. So thoughts on breath work? Anybody use it successfully or thought about it but not used it?
It's helped me a ton. And as you know, like I think one of the biggest problems that I have is like that busy brain. Just if I'm up, if something wakes me up 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., man, my brain immediately starts going. Now I'm like off to the races. And if it's like 1, 2 a.m., like I've been using that. I've been using that, the box breathing to get myself back to sleep, and it really takes away that busy brain. So it's helpful for sure.
That's awesome. So since you're in the Navy, I will mention that a lot of people call that SEAL breathing because anything SEALs do, they think they invented, but it's not in fact the case that the Navy SEALs invented box breathing. They probably started utilizing it a few thousand years after somebody in China or something figured it out, would be my guess. So, all right, hey, let's dive into the clocks because this is huge. You got 3 clocks that I like to focus on. Your master clock is your light sensing clock. So we want to set, like we all have circadian rhythms in all our different systems, even at the cellular level. With regard to sleep, the first thing we can do in the morning to ensure we're going to get a good night's sleep is get out in early morning sunlight. Most of you are probably like, dude, I'm up hours before the sun. That's fine. Still, when that sun's coming up, if you can get out for a few minutes in it, walking the dog, our backyard faces east, so we have a great morning exposure in the backyard, and I try to get out there when the sun's coming up. There's something about our brains and this thing called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the back of our eyeball that literally interprets the bright sun, because that amount of light coming into our eyes is huge, even compared to the bright blue lights that are above us in our ceilings. And that angle, we literally recognize the angle of that light early first couple hours the sun's coming up as early morning sun, and it sets our internal clock to about 16 hours. Like, in other words, in that system, it goes, okay, about 16 hours from now, we should be going to bed. And that helps produce better melatonin naturally and all kinds of things. But of course, on the other end of that, we also have to do the right thing. So getting out in evening sun, if you can get out and kind of be in the outdoors while the sun is setting as well, super good for that master clock. A lot of times that's not realistic. So the other way to think about that is, as the sun is going down and it's getting dark outside, the lighting of your house should also be getting dark outside. So for us, not that I'm in charge, but if I am able to influence it, I'm a big fan of, hey, it's dark, let's turn all the overhead lights off. Let's go to the floor lights, which have a much softer bulb in them. And that blue light that comes out of the cans in your ceilings, or most people's ceiling cans, tells our body that it's daytime, and we shouldn't be, we shouldn't be prepping for sleep. Whereas the softer light of like a softer bulb and all of that at a lower level um, helps our body just more naturally be able to make melatonin and prepare itself for bed. So that's the master clock, and we're going to race through all three of them, and then we'll talk about them. Electronics, I like to call it an electronic sunset. So I can't remember the dude's name that from the Hero app that I first heard talk about that. But like for me, and for what you all and what scientists say is a good baseline practice, all electronics, you should have them all off at least an hour before bed. So, that's where that like, hey, I'm being as productive as I can. I fall asleep in my chair on my laptop getting shit done. That's where you're not, you just like the science says, you're not setting yourself up for great sleep. And a lot of people, when they get their sleep dialed in, they figure out a way to get that. If they say, hey, I'm turning the computer off at, the work computer's getting turned off 7 p.m. and I'm not doing any work on my phone after 7 p.m. either. They figure out a way to make that work. So again, if you think about that electronic sunset, your minimum goal should be at least an hour before lights out bedtime that you are done with electronics. And longer, of course, is better. Like if I know some people are like, man, we shut down computers, and I think I've seen a lot of Stu's data. Like they're done early, and it's like that whole evening time. Yeah, okay. Is a TV show the same as being like sucked into your phone for hours? In my opinion, watching some goofy thing that your kid wants to be watching that is kind of like family time and not as it's not firing you up, it's not spinning your brain up. You got a kid sitting on your lap and a couple dogs like curled up around your feet or whatever. I don't think that's necessarily the exact same thing as being on your work computer. And I find that from a client standpoint, like I've had people who can't watch basketball or their favorite sport at night because it gets them all fired up. But if they're, watching some goofy Avatar cartoon or whatever that, their kids watching or something that's just completely benign, it doesn't have that same effect on spinning up their brain. And then the last big one that I focus on as far as the clocks go is food clock. So the bottom line is you shouldn't be consuming any calories 2 hours before bed. And for me personally, and a lot of people I've worked with, if they can extend that to 3 or 4 hours, no calories, 4 hours before bed, they find that their sleep quality just goes through the roof. Because we don't, if we're digesting a steak that we ate at 9 p.m. And we're in bed at 10:30, like now our body's got to make a decision. Are we going to digest food as our focus, or are we going to rebuild because David is asleep? And that's when we do all of our best work with regard to rebuilding muscle, repair, brain, clean out all your lymphatic system in your brain and all the things that happen while we're asleep as far as getting that body tuned back up like a pit stop for the next day. It has to make a decision. And a lot of times it's going to go to the rebuild. And so you're going to have that steak just sitting in your belly, keeping your core warm because there's a little bit of a want of your body to keep working on digesting that. But like now you've just got these two systems and neither of them are working great because they're too overlapped. So the clocks, master clock, get out in bright sun early in the day, dim everything down once the sun goes down. Electronic sunset, get off your electronics at least an hour before bed. Food clock, if you can do it every day, 2-hour break between your last calorie, whether it's something you drink or eat, and going to bed. And let's talk about it because these like, lots of questions usually.
The man, the food clock for me has been a game changer. Like I've found that, if I now get off of my normal regular routine and I have like a late dinner because of some kids, activities or sports or something like that, and then try to still go to bed. I'm like you, right? I go to bed really early and get up really early. So like if I'm not like done eating by 6 o'clock, because I'm typically in bed by, 8:30, 9 o'clock, like it crushes me. Like I have a terrible night of sleep if I'm eating, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, because then I'm gonna go to bed right afterwards. The other thing that I've found, and I've pretty much quit, well, I have pretty much quit, is alcohol. You didn't touch on that at all, but I've found that since stopping drinking alcohol, I sleep a whole lot better.
Yeah, if you want to prioritize sleep and you like to drink, my recommendation is breakfast because
You cut out there. What'd you say? You drink at breakfast?
yeah, if you're gonna drink at
Mimosas,
breakfast.
man, mimosas,
Yeah,
and
mimosas because you're gonna all the alcohol is gonna be burned off before bed. So if you've got a sleep tracker and you actually pay attention to what a good food clock night of sleep looks like, whether there's alcohol involved or not, and then what a hey, I had a big meal way too close to bedtime, what that looks like. And I'm not talking about like the algorithm numbers. I'm talking about the hard science numbers that some of these sleep trackers do a really good job with, which is heart rate variability, skin temperature, respiratory rate, and actigraphy, how much you're moving around. Those five things, you can look at those on most devices and feel pretty good about what you're seeing, especially if you're wearing. All the other algorithmy things are good to kind of pay attention to, but I really like to focus on the real numbers. If you drink a couple beverages before bed, your heart rate's going to be up. Your heart rate variability is going to be down. Your respiratory rate's going to be up because you're trying to off gas that alcohol. Your body considers alcohol poison. It does everything it can to get rid of it as soon as possible. And your respiratory rate's going to be high. Skin temperature is usually going to be elevated because your body's working hard to it's working as opposed to resting, recovering to get rid of that alcohol or because it's confused. It's like, hey, we got to rebuild, but we're also trying to digest food, even if there's no alcohol involved. So all those numbers, and a lot of teams even moving around, you just move around a lot more. Right? You got a bunch of food in you. And then another weird thing about alcohol, I know a lot of people, and I've experienced it myself because I do love a delicious IPA or two once in a while. And I try to drink them earlier in the day, about the time. Nah, I was going to make a joke about when I'm picking up the kids, but my kids are homeschooled. That would be a lie. Uh, the, oh gosh, my joke interfered with my real thought. Well, that's embarrassing. But yeah, so the sleep numbers are real, like the real science numbers are so like your experience, and again kind of working with you through this, Stu, it was cool to watch, and Stu's like a very recent example of, hey, I did a lot of stuff right, but I didn't have real oh, here, let me just check these blocks off, to make sure I'm following a consistent set of, I call them lead indicators, to make sure I'm doing the best I can. So that's where if you pay attention and you build some systems and you track them, you can be like, well, this is helping when I get this right. And this isn't, the norm isn't exactly right for me here, but this way of doing it is right. You end up with knowing what works for you, and if you know what works for you, it's much easier to repeat it. So I am done, and we can go into this, and then I've got some like a little quick hits wrap up. But questions on all of that stuff, and would it be useful if I go back? Maybe shouldn't have done for the group questions. All right. Well, I'll fast forward to, here's where I like to start with. So if you were going to take a picture of a slide, because this is That's thoughtful for you. This is where I would start.
And I'll send this out in a replay to everyone who registered, even for the guys who missed it. This is good.
Awesome.
Alex, food clock. You said you talked about the 2 hours prior to bed. Any indication of when you start eating? Does that have any impact?
Not necessarily on sleep. Part of this better basic system. That is a different different discussion. I would say one hack I can give you, because we all occasionally find ourselves in that
Alex,
situation.
move left a little bit to in front of your microphone. There you go.
So if it's late and you normally are done your food clock, but you've got to get something in your system and you want to minimize the disruption for bed, I go to protein shake. So if it's late, if I mix up a protein shake, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's pre-digested. So is it going to have the same requirements for your body? A 50-gram protein shake that's got a little bit of peanut butter in it too, that so it sticks to your ribs a little bit as well. Is that the same as eating 50 grams of protein in a steak and then digesting that? Absolutely not. Very different. So that's kind of my trick, or not trick, but I hate the word hack. But I'll use it here because it applies. That's my hack for, hey, I'm into my food clock being over, but I got to get something in my system just for the overall day of performance. And I still am wanting to go to bed in an hour and a half. I go to protein shakes for that.
That's good. Cool.
This has been fun, man. I appreciate everybody attending and all of that.
Yeah, for sure, man. Solid information. Guys, any other final last questions before I hit the stop record and go about our days? Alex, tell people where they can reach out to you if they want more information.
Yeah. So this is my website, or actually it's not. It's just, thank you. So my website is www.fpp.llc. So my company's First Principles Performance LLC, and I was able to get that as my landing on the webs. If you want to just email me directly with a question or a comment from this, it's Alex, ALEX at fpp.llc. I meant to throw that in on one of this last slide, but apparently I did not.
I got you, man. Alex has a great blog, tons of really, really good information about health, about all of these categories: eat, sleep, move, think. I read every single one of them, and they're really good. So at a minimum, you might want to subscribe to that. Sweet. Alex, thanks, man.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
This was really good. I'm going to stop recording.